Hey everyone, welcome to another Locker Room Talk edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
Joe, this week's Locker Room Talk is Mardi Gras themed. Of course, I'm wearing my flag beads in salute to my Eagles brethren. I feel like Eagles and Saints fans share a commonality that a defensive penalty that either was or wasn't called cost us our Super Bowl opportunities. And I feel for my Eagles fans. I feel so much that if I were to see an Eagles fan in a Mardi Gras parade, which I may be in, that I may actually throw these beads to them. Not sure yet. It's either going to happen or I may wait until the Saints win a Super Bowl and I feel like these beads can finally be put to bed.
Well, the one crazy thing I will say about the Eagles is that's the one team, ironically, in the playoffs that the Saints have not had trouble with. I think they've beaten them 3 times in the playoffs.
Their very first playoff win ever with Jim Haslett. I remember this clear as day. I think it was like 2001 was against the Eagles.
And I think Breeze and Peyton, I think they went 3-0 against them, including the only road playoff win ever.
Yeah. So maybe they don't feel as much brotherly love towards us as we feel to them.
I guess.
And so, the theme of this week's locker room talk, with it being Mardi Gras week, is Laissez, le bon temps, Roulet. That's let the good times roll. And so these are different players and teams that have things rolling right now, and there are some good times. And Joe, of course, there's none that are flying higher right now. Sorry, Eagles fans, for yet another pun. Then Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, of course, Travis Kelce, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now they've won their second Super Bowl in 4 years. And as you so eloquently put it in the last episode, did it in a year that was supposed to be a rebuilding year and not one where we expect to see them holding the Lombardi trophy.
Right. And so now at 27 years old, Patrick Mahomes has 2 Super Bowls. And so suddenly, since he's already got a lot of his hardware, whereas you see a lot of quarterbacks that are always playing, into their 30s, almost chasing a ring. At this point, it's really just about him chasing his legacy and just solidifying his legacy the rest of the way.
That's right. I mean, at this point, we're not saying he's within shooting distance of Tom Brady or anything, but what he's done with being in the league for such a short period of time with 2 Super Bowls, nearly missing out on a third one, lets you know that he's got a chance to win 4 or 5, who knows, maybe even 6 Super Bowls, especially if he can keep having Andy Reid for as long as he's able to coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was good news for him that Reid announced, I think it was Sunday night, that he's definitely wanting to come back because there was some, peripheral speculation about retirement being an option if they won the game. And so I think it's great to keep this duo together because I think that if you were to bring in a new coach, Mahomes would still put up good numbers and big numbers. But I think having Reid there, that's just a good, dynamic that allows them to chase, maybe a back-to-back championship as early as next year and try to get that third title. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how many Super Bowls Mahomes can win. It's going to be interesting to see how his game matures as he gets into his 30s too.
Right. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how well he does when maybe his mobility is a little bit, taken away. That's not the number one aspect of his game by any stretch. I mean, the number one part of him is that his ability to throw at different angles. I mean, that's what I think makes Mahomes different from any other quarterback. You have Phil Rivers throws the sidearm. You have a traditional quarterback that throws it like this. But everything, including like the slot, from the side to the shovel pass, like Mahomes can do all of it just so amazingly. I think that's the number one feature that he has, and that's something that should last with him even into his mid 30s. But the running ability, of course, is eventually gonna go away, and that's going to be where you start to see, like in the end of his career, is he able to do what Tom Brady did and win Super Bowls in his 40s? That's what's going to be, the question right then.
Yeah, and the more you think about what Brady did, even playing like at the level he did until 45, it's just surreal. Winning the Super Bowl at 43, it's just almost unimaginable to think about Patrick Mahomes doing this for another 18 years is what it would take to reach 45. If anybody can do it, I definitely wouldn't put it past him. But I think that if you're Mahomes, you have to kind of look past that individually and think to yourself, you have an opportunity, I think, to make your own legacy. And I think there's a possibility, if he can keep this up, that we could maybe come away 10 years from now declaring him to some extent the LeBron James of the NFL.
Yeah.
The guy never, Michael Jordan, can't get to that level, but maybe the most talented player we've ever seen, especially because I've seen, Dan, with a lot of athletes over the years, the age 28 to like 30, 31, 32 seasons, sometimes those can be the best years. Mm-hmm. And that could be the scary thing for the NFL, is that Patrick Mahomes, individually, I think may even have as good a seasons as he's ever going to have the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to think too that look at the way he played the last 2 games of the season with a obvious, injury with a high ankle sprain. That's him going at maybe 65%, and he's still able to get big runs, and he's still able to make all the passes. And as I said in our last podcast, even more impressively, he was still able to not get sacked against the best defensive line in the NFL. And you know what the key to maintaining your career is for a long time as a quarterback is taking those sacks down, reducing that. That was something that Tom Brady, even though he wasn't someone that was going to get a 50-yard touchdown run, he was great at moving in the pocket and avoiding getting sacked.
Mm-hmm. Right. He was outstanding at that, getting the ball out early too. And, that's definitely something I think that Mahomes is going to have to factor in. And, he's going to have competition in the AFC, having Justin Herbert, obviously having Joe Burrow, having Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it's going to be tough some years just to make it to the Super Bowl. But we have seen him virtually dominate his division, which I think has helped a lot. I saw a stat that the Chiefs are 27-3 against AFC West competition since Mahomes took over as the starter. And so they just dominated the division. But now, they're going to have to deal with Justin Herbert getting better. Sean Payton's in that division now. So there are going to be some factors that will make it tough. But again, if anybody can do it, it's Mahomes and Reed.
And Joe, I mean, you mentioned the fact that Reed's coming back, keeping the band together, keeping him, Reed, Travis Kelce, all of you together. That's what makes them a great team moving forward, and that's what's keeping the good times rolling.
And then the last thing I'll say on that note, the challenge too for Mahomes will be once we see the new cycle when Travis Kelce, eventually moves on, which could probably happen sooner rather than later. Mahomes is going to be playing with a new wide receiving and tight end core. How is his game going to translate? You look at Tom Brady's career, with the Patriots and Buccaneers, it's like he played with like 4 or 5 different teams when you factor in all the different sporting casts.
Yeah, I mean, you think about one of the things that I think is the coolest thing about Tom Brady is how many different people he won having been his centerpiece, from having it be Gronkowski to Randy Moss to Julian Edelman to Wes Welker. I mean, it was whoever was there, he made him better. And right now, it seems like Mahomes is definitely the kind of guy that can do that, especially when you think about what he did with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, with Juju Smith-Schuster, guys that were pretty good receivers at where they were before, but now with Mahomes, they've really elevated their game. And Travis Kelce, someone that's going to make anybody look better. But, I think I said it a couple shows ago, if you give someone like George Kittle's Patrick Mahomes, are we not talking about him the same way we're talking about Travis Kelce right now? And there's a lot of tight ends that are at that level, but Kelce just gets to show it so much because he has that quarterback that can always put it right there where he wants it.
Right. No, that's a good point. He's definitely, it's been a great, dynamic. They each made each other better. And obviously, catching passes from Mahomes makes him look really good. The last thing I wanted just to mention, did we want to make a prediction for how many Super Bowls Mahomes might win with the Chiefs eventually?
Yeah, we can do that right now. I think this is as good a time as any. So right now he's at 2 Super Bowls. And Joe, this also brings me to a fact that you had told me earlier. I think you told me like last week that I just thought was mind-blowing, that Mahomes has now won more playoff games than Drew Brees and Brett Favre. Is that correct?
So I was mistaken on Favre. I think he's 2 behind Favre, but only 2 behind, after
I mean,
5 years is still crazy. But he
and Brett
has,
Favre played till he was 43 too. So I mean,
but he surpassed Breeze and he's at 11 wins. I think he's only 4 behind Joe Montana.
that's crazy. And Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls, so that's definitely highly impressive. Well, so okay, so let's do this, Joe. So the pinnacle, of course, the Tom Brady is sitting there as the Michael Jordan of the NFL, essentially. He's got seven Super Bowls. Right now, we sit here and Patrick Mahomes has 2. There's a lot of great quarterbacks that have 2 Super Bowls. Both the Mannings, Peyton and Eli, they have 2 Super Bowls. He's got more right now than Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has only ever won 1 Super Bowl. More than the aforementioned Mississippi great Brett Favre. He only ever won 1 Super Bowl. You get to the next level, 3. Then you're at what? Terry Bradshaw won 3 Super Bowls. Troy Aikman won 3 Super Bowls. You get to 4. I think Joe Montana sits there by himself at 4. Maybe
Terry
Bart
Bradshaw.
Starr. Did Bart Starr win 4 Super Bowls?
I know Bradshaw won 4, I think. With the
Sorry, you're right. Terry Bradshaw did win 4 Super Bowls. I mistakenly said 3 there. Actually, I think the Bradshaw and Aikman won the same amount. I think they both won 4 Super Bowls. So,
but there's not that many guys with 2 when you think about it. There's so many of them that are in that Favre, Breeze, Rodgers, purgatory of just 1.
mm-hmm. Yeah, even guys that played in multiple Super Bowls but still only won that 1, like Brett Favre. Yeah, I mean, you get to 4, and at that point, you're sitting there with 3 guys, that being Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, and Troy Aikman. And if you get to 5, then you're just sitting there right behind Tom Brady. So I think the question is, in mentioning putting him at LeBron level, which is you may be more talented than the GOAT, but no one's ever going to think of you as the GOAT, most likely.
Yes.
And I think that's a fair way to put it. There's always going to be nostalgia with Brady. There's going to be how long he did it. We have no idea whether Patrick Mahomes will do this for another 10 years, another 5 years, another 15. Like he could be like Tom Brady. But here's the question for now, Joe. Do we say that we think he's going to at least hit 5 and pass the trio of Montana, Bradshaw, and Aikman? I think that's the question for now. Do we think that he gets at least 5?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he gets 4, 2 more.
Okay.
I'm going to say he plays in at least 3 more Super Bowls, but he only wins 2 more. And I'm going to say that it has a lot to do with eventually Andy Reid will probably retire while Mahomes still has a lot more years to play. I think that'll be a factor. And then also, I think with the crowded quarterback carousel in the AFC, I can't imagine Burrow not winning 1 or 2. I can't imagine Lawrence not winning at least 1. Jalen Hurts is in the NFC. I mean, there's too many guys where I think that 4 is where I would predict at this point.
Okay. Joe, this has been one that I've been sitting there thinking about. Obviously, I've kind of tilted my hand. I don't think he's going to win 7 or 8 Super Bowls. He's not going to surpass Tom Brady. I don't see it. The biggest thing that is like what you said. It's going to be Andy Reid. How much longer he has? I believe he's 64 years old right now. He doesn't appear to be the same kind of 64 that Nick Saban was at 64. I think that in my mind, you probably have 4 to 5 more years tops with Andy Reid, probably maybe more like 2 or 3. I think he's going to win at least 1 more Super Bowl with Andy Reid. I'll give him 1 more with him. I'm going to say he gets to 5. I think 5 is where it is. I think he gets on that level by himself, and it's just Tom Brady up there at 7, then it's Mahomes. I think that 5 is realistic, but I wouldn't be shocked if he only won 1 more.
We know probably for him to get to 5 or more, it would probably take somebody, like a Sean McVay, maybe becoming the coach of the Chiefs, somebody where it wouldn't be as big of a massive drop-off losing Andy Reid.
That's an interesting idea. Well, let me say this. I think Sean McVay, if given the opportunity to work with someone like Patrick Mahomes, would definitely get out of retirement for that.
Sean Payton probably almost, wishes that he had waited a few more years, could have been the coach at some point for the Chiefs.
Oh man, can you imagine Sean Payton with Patrick Mahomes? That would be brutal. That would be scary for the rest of the league right there.
It would be. I mean, and so the rest of the league got a lot of competition, but it's a copycat league, so it's going to be a fascinating offseason.
Definitely. All right, Joe. Speaking of some really good times rolling, like the Chiefs, and they won 2 out of 4, but they haven't won back-to-back national championships. The Georgia Bulldogs right now sitting there with back-to-back natties. Now, of course, they lost Stetson Bennett, who was their quarterback for both of them. But Joe, even more importantly, was the person who left yesterday, and that was offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who I think has just done wonders for this Georgia team. Because you look at where Georgia was when Kirby first got there, their offenses weren't great. They were very similar to what we saw in the beginning of Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama. Really good ground and pound type offenses, ball control, but they didn't win shootouts very often. And in fact, they would lose games where their defense didn't play that great. And a lot of times when they played these upper level defenses, they would just kind of disappear. And they weren't known for even passing the ball that well, even with players of the talent of Justin Fields. I mean, Kirby wasn't even enlightened enough to see that he needed to play Justin Fields over Jake Fromm, who Jake Fromm was a perfectly serviceable quarterback, but he was never a guy that was going to throw for 500 yards or a guy who would take the kind of beating that Clemson put on Justin Fields and go out there and still be able to play and do that kind of effort. And then Todd Monken comes in, he takes a kid who, we all know the Stetson Bennett story, started at Georgia as a walk-on, had to transfer away, played at Jones Community College in Mississippi, and he comes back in as the third stringer, gets his opportunity and takes the most of it. And Stetson Bennett improved so much in the 2 years he was the starting quarterback. And I feel like you attribute like the lion's share of that to Todd Monken. I mean, of course, Stetson Bennett appears to be a very driven young man and doing excellent things, at least until the offseason. But Todd Monken, I think, is the one who really made him good and really diversified this Georgia offense that shows a lot of these pro principles using Brock Bowers in a very similar method to Travis Kelce. Having a lot more deep balls that you saw the way they did it against TCU and going away from that ground and pound offense that took Georgia from being a very talented team that it's going to be a tough out to one that's a virtually impossible out.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And I think this is definitely a significant loss for Georgia. I just don't see any way around it that they're not going to miss Monken. I think that with their schedule next year, they're still set up to have great regular season success. But to me, this is the type of departure and loss that is going to impact them potentially in a big game, especially with the new quarterback coming in. I thought that the timing of this, it just kind of surprised me. I really had forgotten the Ravens even had an OC opening, and especially with the uncertainty about Lamar Jackson and his future in Baltimore, kind of surprised to see Monken take this job and go to the Ravens. Maybe, the Ravens are hoping to be able to recruit Jackson to re-sign with them by bringing in, an offensive genius like Monken. But I saw where Georgia, I guess, promoted Mike Bobo to the offensive coordinator position. And hasn't he previously been their OC?
Yes, Joe. When Mark Richt was there, he was Georgia's offensive coordinator for a while. I mean, Bobo's about as experienced as they come. I mean, of course, he played quarterback at Georgia in the 90s. I remember that, a night that was really rough for my family, but that I won't go into, was the night that Auburn and Georgia played in the first overtime game in the SEC when I was a little kid, and Bobo was the quarterback in that game. And so I remember watching him in college, and then after that, he was the offensive coordinator for a long time at Georgia under Mark Richt. Mixed successes. He kind of a very blasé kind of pro-style offense. He went and was the head coach at Colorado State for a couple of years, was the offensive coordinator at South Carolina, and then in Harson's first season at Auburn, he was Auburn's offensive coordinator. And, it seemed like he did make Bo Nix better in some ways. I felt like we saw some improvements with Bo Nix. But I did feel like there were like a lot of really questionable play calls, including in the against Penn State when they chose to throw it on 4th and goal instead of running it with either Jarquez Hunter or with Tank Bigsby, who were both having big games. And I just don't. The offenses that I saw with him were never great offenses. Let's just say that if I were a Georgia fan and I lost Todd Monken and Mike Bobo as my replacement, I would be less than pleased.
Yes, yes. Like to me, it feels like a step back. I think that it would concern me for Georgia, going thinking back to the Mark Richt era, because I kind of felt like they had gone away from that, suddenly winning championships. And I don't really want to get back, with that mindset if I'm a Georgia fan. That would depress me, I think, a little bit. And then also, I feel like anytime you promote within to that extent, it's almost like you lose like a voice in the coaches' meetings. Like I want to bring in somebody, if I can't have Todd
The
Monken,
new
I feel like
perspectives.
yes, somebody else who can give me a new perspective, to keep us hungry to try to, three-peat. And I feel like this was just kind of a lazy hire where I feel like Georgia could have done better than this.
I think like Georgia could have named the offense coordinator they wanted. Um, you saw Alabama go out there and get kind of an interesting offensive coordinator hire with Tommy Rees from Notre Dame. And I kind of feel like you had your chance to go out there and get the next young, brilliant mind. And instead, I mean, in my mind, you got to use Tread, SEC offensive coordinator, who, he's gotten to that place because obviously he's very talented, but it just seems a little used up. It's kind of like Todd Grantham. I think Alabama may have done a good job with their offensive coordinator hire. But I remember like Todd Grantham was being talked about as a possible defensive coordinator for Alabama, and that was someone who I was like, this is a used Tread SEC defensive coordinator who I heard the Saints got him, which I wasn't thrilled about. Who was too much risk, too much risk with him, was blitzing every single play, and that kind of stuff can get old and can get abused pretty easily. And so that's the way I feel a little bit about this Bobo hire. I mean, I almost feel like that would have been a better hire if you had Stetson Bennett coming back for another season, because I feel like Bobo's pretty good at developing veteran quarterbacks. I never saw a whole lot with the younger quarterbacks with him and with really having great offenses when it wasn't really set up for him.
Right. And the experienced quarterback would have been able to, be more accustomed to bringing some of what he had learned from Monken's system. And now, it's a new quarterback, trying to, learn from a new OC for them. I just feel like, Dan, it's going to impact them. I think it's just a matter of time. I think they're going to be different without Monken.
I think they're going to be different. And while I would have given them a fair chance of three-peating before this hire, I'm betting the field now.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's that significant. Yep.
All right, Joe. Georgia's got it rolling right now, and until we say otherwise, I mean, we can speculate on the effects of the Bobo hire and the Monken departure, but they're rolling right now. I'll tell you who else is rolling, and I saw her in person, and not just her, but also her cohort, Darian Goborn. There'll be Suni Lee and the Auburn gymnastics team. My wife and I got to go to our first gymnastics meet in Neville Arena, where Auburn also plays basketball. And number 6 Auburn took on number 9 LSU in gymnastics. And Joe, I mean, this is everyone knows this is Suni Lee's last year in college because she's going back to train to be in the Olympics. I don't know whether that means she can come back or not. I'm not sure if there's a exception written out for Olympic athletes, but we at least know that this is going to be her last year for a while at Auburn. And so everyone's been going to get their one chance to see her. This was a great opportunity with 2 top 10 teams. LSU's got a very good gymnastics history. And I got to see Suni Lee on the uneven bars do a perfect 10, which was incredible. We had pretty good seats, too. There's no real bad seats in Neville Arena, where I got a lot of really good videos, which if you want to watch, if you want to look at our Instagram, I'm going to be posting those later. A lot of our pictures and videos from the gymnastics event. And Auburn gymnastics right now is really rolling. Number 6, they were able to get the win over LSU. And what I thought was so funny is the very beginning of that meet, my wife mentioned to me that she had never seen LSU lose in anything when she was there. I've taken her to Death Valley twice to watch Ole Miss LSU games, including this year, neither of which ended very well for the Rebels. And I don't know what else she's been to, but she's never been to any kind of event where LSU lost. And of course, when she first mentioned that, I said, don't waken the voodoo gods. If you mention it, bad things are going to happen because things do tend to work out for LSU. But it was a really compelling match. Auburn ended up winning by 3/10 of a point and just really tight, which, gymnastics scoring is very strange. I mean, I think Auburn lost to Alabama in gymnastics by 1.125, so like, 0.12 essentially. And so those scores can be very close, but it was really amazing. And what I liked even more than Suni Lee was Darian Goborn and watching her floor routine and some of the stuff that she could do. And what was really cool about her floor routine is that her brother is a DJ, and it's almost kind of like a Billie Eilish and her brother type relationship where, Billie Eilish is the producer that, makes all the music and Billie Eilish sings over it. Well, Darian Goborn's brother makes all of this music that she dances to, and it's a really cool like combination. And her floor routine at the very end was what put Auburn over the top to win, and it was excellent.
That sounds really spectacular, Dan. And the question I had: what is the crowd volume like, or how does the crowd behave or react at a gymnastics meet?
Well, it's kind of like what you think about when you're watching tennis or golf, right? Like people aren't really going to be making a lot of noise while they're doing what they do. It's when it gets done, right? So when you do the uneven bars, it's when you land it that you have the crowd go off. Um, when they're doing the floor routine, when they end, usually with their pose on the ground, that's when the crowd will start getting excited. Now, I will say that there's a group of Auburn students they call the gymnasties that while the LSU girls were doing their floor routine and other things, they were trying to heckle them and do things like that. And I was like, I don't really know there's a place for this in gymnastics, but I don't know. I guess they were getting into it, right? So I thought that was kind of funny.
That's an interesting name, gymnasties. I guess that's probably something that's caught on.
Yes, the gymnasties. Yeah, they were really into it. I mean, it was kind of like being in the outfield of an Ole Miss baseball game when you hear what they're yelling at the center fielder and all that kind of stuff. So there is a little bit of that going on. And what I thought was amazing, Joe, is that it was standing room only. I mean, it was a complete sellout. Like, and I never thought I'd see gymnastics like that at Auburn.
No, that's really cool. Like I've only seen gymnastics on TV. It sounds like a great event.
It was really neat. Yeah. I mean, it took me a little bit to like get, how all the scoring went, the way that it works. It's kind of interesting. So you'll have a warm-up period that's extended, then there's like a shorter warm-up period, and then each team will do a different event and they'll switch off. So like you'll have the floor routine, Auburn's doing it, LSU's doing the balance beam. And so you'll have, let's say, Suni Lee do her floor routine, and then an LSU girl will do her balance beam. They kind of switch off like that. So they're not doing the same event at the same time, but they are doing LSU girl, then Auburn girl, and they're switching off that way. And so we ended up getting in the seats that, what you got was a choice of what you wanted to see. And I always thought, maybe you should have gone with the floor routine, but in my mind, I always thought the uneven bars was kind of a cool thing to watch. And so I chose the seats over there, which I guess worked out for me because I got to see Suni Lee's perfect 10 right in front of me with the balance or with the uneven bars.
Do they move I guess the basketball goals and everything out of there so you can see the whole court?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they move the whole basketball out, and then they have all the different setups. Of course, the biggest one being the floor routine. Next biggest one being the vault, which of course that's cool when they run and they do the little flip, and vault off. And then the smallest space being probably the uneven bars.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so big time there, of course, they made the women's gymnastics finals last year. I think the top 8 teams make that, or the top 4 teams make it. It's kind of like a Final Four type deal. And, they got a good chance to do it again this year at number 6. And that was a big win over LSU at number 9. So I was very glad that I got to see that and that I didn't drop all the money to go to that and to watch Auburn lose at home to Alabama in basketball, who, in their name, Roll Tide, right, was previously rolling. They had some good times rolling, but Joe, they just lost tonight to Tennessee to break their perfect SEC record.
Yeah, I mean, in Tennessee, granted, they have an outstanding defensive team, and I think they potentially held Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, to a season low points. I think they were under 65, which was the previous
That's very
season
low for Alabama.
season low. If I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong, but it was under 65 for a while, if not. And so Tennessee had a great defensive effort tonight, but Alabama suffers their first loss of the season. I'm sure that they'll try to look at it through that glass half full round and say that they needed a loss, to kind of hunker down for the stretch run. But suddenly, they went from kind of being invincible in the SEC to coming back down to earth.
The question is, Joe, is are they still going to get number one overall seed? Because last year Auburn, I think, dropped 2 games in the SEC, and they were number one in America for a couple weeks. And they ended up not getting a number one seed. They ended up getting a 2 seed. And with Alabama not being a Duke, Kentucky, Kansas type blue blood, will they get dropped out of the one line only because of this loss? I'm interested to see whether Alabama can still get a number one seed the rest of the way.
I think they will, especially if they run the table from here. With Tennessee, even though they lost a couple of buzzer beaters recently, I think that they were still a top 10 or top 12 team coming into play tonight. And so I think that Alabama, with the rest of the teams nationwide, not really separating themselves either, I think that Alabama and Purdue at this point are both in really good shape for a 1 seed.
I think they should. I think that Alabama should get a 1 seed, especially if they can go out and win the SEC tournament too. I think that would be a lot. I think probably for them, maybe making the championship of the SEC tournament and winning the league would get them a 1 seed.
Yeah, I think right now they're in great shape. I think Purdue, Houston, and I would say whoever wins the Big 12, like if it's Kansas or Baylor, has a great chance.
Absolutely. And Joe, on that subject, guess who else is rolling? The Big 12 basketball conference. They've got back-to-back national champions. Baylor, of course, beating undefeated Gonzaga to keep Gonzaga from being the first team since 1972 Indiana to go undefeated wire to wire to win the national championship. And then, of course, last year, Kansas making that huge comeback against upstart North Carolina, who came out of nowhere to make the championship game. Kansas, of course, having 2 national championships under Bill Self. So it's back-to-back national championships. In this Big 12 league, Joe, it is very, very loaded and deep. I mean, Kansas is a top 10 team. Baylor is top 15. Texas is a top 15 team. TCU is a top 15 team. Iowa State is a top 15 team. You got to go really deep down to find a team that's, not in the top 25. And what are we looking at? About 8 teams that are probably going to go to the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. And even Oklahoma, who's had kind of a disappointing season, they beat
Alabama.
Alabama. They routed
Badly,
Alabama,
too.
The best SEC team. And so the strength of the conference to me is somewhat unprecedented for this league to be this deep. They've had some great seasons. They've had years, obviously, where Kansas is right there year in and year out. But the depth of the league the last few years has just never been better.
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, if you want to get a great example of where the Big 12 is, look at the Big 12 SEC champion challenge. I think the Big 12 ended up getting 7 out of 10 against the SEC. And one game that I think really shows you how good the Big 12 is West Virginia beat Auburn. They beat them by 1 point at home. And West Virginia is a team that is, I think, they're among either the first 4 in or the first 4 out. They've been kind of floating on that line all year. And they were able to beat Auburn, who is probably looking at right about a 9 seed right now. And I think that shows you that the middle of the Big 12 right now is better than the middle of the SEC. And you look at the fact that Oklahoma, a team that right now probably not going to make the tournament and is in the bottom level of the Big 12, destroyed Alabama at home. And that's how good all of their teams can be on any given day.
Yes, in contrast to the Big East, which is not the conference it used to be with all the realignment. The ACC's kind of had a down year. The Pac-12 is just kind of in the Pac-12, and so the Big 12 is just kind of taking the torch.
Absolutely. I mean, and Kansas went on the road and beat Kentucky really bad after losing a couple games in a row. And I think that was also a huge flexing point for them right now. And the Big 12 is the best conference of basketball right now.
It is, Dan. And then the other thing I was going to say that's rolling, I know that I wanted to mention the Braves being in good shape with a lot of young players. As we get ready for the season, spring training starting this week. You could probably also throw the Astros into that category too, coming off the title last year. But I'd also be remiss, I didn't think about this earlier, with college baseball starting this weekend, if I didn't mention Mississippi State and Ole Miss. They're rolling with national titles coming into the season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the state of Mississippi now in college baseball heads into 2023.
Yeah, Joe, how about the state of Mississippi in general is rolling when you have Mississippi State win the title, Ole Miss winning the title, Southern Miss last year being a top 8 seed and hosting a super regional. Could it be possible that you go State, Ole Miss, Southern, back to back to back? That would be the most epic baseball ever. Very highly unlikely, but I would love to see it.
I mean, they have a chance. Southern Miss lost, unfortunately, one of their best pitchers in the transfer portal to Florida, Hurston Waldrop. So that's a big loss, but they still have their best pitcher coming back. They've got some key offensive players that have been around for a while. And so the cool thing about college baseball is you just never know, as we saw, the last 2 years.
That's right. Not only can you come to the SIP for Mardi Gras, it's also rolling in baseball right now, and all of the programs right now, the main 3 programs in Mississippi, got 2 of them that are coming off national championships, and of course, Southern Miss coming off a top 8 overall seed last year. Really good baseball right now happening in the Magnolia State.
And finally, just fascinated to see how Bianco's encore year is because, for once the narrative has shifted. There's no hot seat anymore. It's going to be kind of cool to see what a free year looks like.
That's right. There's no hot seat. There's no mention of him taking any other jobs. So it's time for Bianco to get back to baseball and to not listening to music like he always does.
Yeah, I don't know if he saw the halftime show.
No, I don't think that he had any thoughts on Rihanna because he doesn't have ears for music because he doesn't know what it does.
Right.
And with that being said, that's an old joke from back in the days when we were at Ole Miss when Mike Bianco told us that he doesn't like music. That shows you how hyper-focused he is. And thank you for all of our listeners. You can catch older episodes on Spotify and, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Dan Joe Sports Show YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at DJ Sports Show and on Instagram to catch all of my videos from gymnastics and the Senior Bowl. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.